Okay, so hello and welcome. So thank you for being here despite the current heat wave. As you said, Polly, what a better time to have a climate fiction seminar than during a heat wave. So we have people in the room, but we also have quite a few people also online. So thank you for being here, even though you're not in Grenoble. So this seminar is part of the FORESEE program Climate Fictions project. This is a program that explores the experiences of individuals, organizations, territories, and public action in the face of climate change. So it's part of Axis 1 of the FORESEE program, which focuses on individuals facing climate change, emotions, discourse, and speculative narratives. So we've been doing this seminar for, when was it, James? October 2023, the first one? So yes. It's been a little while now. This is number 7, so we're very happy to be able to continue and to be part of the FORESEE program. So during this seminar, we all have the pleasure of listening to Solange Ayash, who is a senior lecturer in English literature and English as a foreign language at the Graduate School of Teaching and Education, INSPE de Paris, Sorbonne University, and a member of the research center, Voix anglophone, Littérature et Esthétique, Vallée, where she co-leads a seminar series on theatre and youth in the UK with Aloysia Rousseau. Her research focuses on contemporary British theatre and performance, adopting an interdisciplinary approach grounded in the medical and environmental humanities, so eco-theatre, eco-criticism, ecofeminism, disability studies, trauma studies, care ethics, and mental health, as well as in the intersections between literature, performance, and the sciences, neuroscience, psychology, cognitive science, and the quantum physics. She is particularly interested in how urgent questions concerning the state of the world, the brain, the body, and embodied perception are represented in theatre, dramatic literature, and spoken word. Her PhD dissertation, entitled In Your Head Theatre, Staging the Mind in Contemporary British Drama Towards a Quantum Psychopoetics of the Stage, Université Paris-Sorbonne, and University of Sheffield in 2017, analysed a range of theatrical experiments engaging with mental illness and the representation of cognitive processes on stage. She has published numerous peer-reviewed articles and book chapters on playwrights and theatre makers such as Martin Crimp, Sarah Kane, Anthony Nielsen, Nick Payne, Simon Stevens, and Simon McBurney, among others. She is also interested in innovative performance practices and cross-media works, addressing these issues in activist and/or educational contexts. Her other research interests include gender studies, children's literature and theatre, drama in education, and neurodiversity in the classroom. And today, she will be giving a talk entitled Climate Fiction in Contemporary British Theatre, Staging Futurity in the Age of Ecological Crisis.
Thank you very much, Marie, for this long introduction and also for the invitation, of course. And I'm very happy to be here today for many reasons, despite the heat. And I'm especially grateful for this opportunity to contribute to this seminar series on climate fiction and talk about contemporary eco-theatre and think about what the stage can contribute to these conversations. So as a scholar of contemporary British drama, I have become increasingly interested in the ways that theatre engages with the climate crisis and attempts to represent a global phenomenon that remains difficult to comprehend, to imagine, to narrate, to stage. As a collective, we have now been experiencing and witnessing droughts, floods, storms, tsunamis, wildfires, and heat waves at a pace, on a scale, and to degrees never seen before. And the current temperatures today in Grenoble make global warming a very tangible reality, once again for each of us in this room at least. And the concept of climate change allows us to apprehend all this through scientific models, probabilities, projections and narratives. So while these events transform our world in real time, forcing us to adapt our daily lives and creating fractures in our personal and collective timelines, the scenarios impact the way we envision the future, make decisions, and view and position ourselves. And this tension between experience and abstraction, between scientific certainty and imaginative uncertainty, lies at the heart of the plays I will discuss today. So beyond the question of how climate change is represented on stage and how eco-theatre uses fiction to portray our collective and personal struggles as we try to make sense of and live with the environmental crisis, what I would like to examine today is what happens to dramatic form when the future and the deep uncertainty surrounding it becomes the primary object of drama as a result of the central place it now occupies in our discourses and representations. So I had initially intended to explore this question through three plays from the British stage of the past 15 years. The first being Duncan Macmillan's Lungs, 2011, Dawn King's The Trials, 2022, and Flora Wilson Brown's The Beautiful Future is Coming, 2025. I will mainly focus on Lungs, so the first play I just mentioned, but I'm more than happy to discuss the other two plays later, if you have any questions about them. So while they differ in scale, temporality, political imagination, and emotional register, these plays all engage with the ambivalent and often contradictory responses elicited by the broken promise of a livable planet. In all three of them, the future is not only discussed or represented as an object of imagination and projection, it is also an object of unprecedented anxiety and accountability, whether collective or individual. So taken together, these plays embark us on a journey from private eco-anxiety, especially in Lungs, to collective accountability and climate justice in The Trials, to historical continuity and cautious hope in The Beautiful Future is Coming. And in doing so, they provide a representative framework for examining how ecological rupture is translated into dramatic eco-fiction through various forms of fracture, dislocation, and temporal disruption. I'll start with a brief presentation of the plays and the authors. So Duncan Macmillan, the author of Lungs, is a former writer-in-residence at Plainplough in the Royal Exchange Theatre, and he's a multiple award-winning English playwright and director, most famous for his plays Lungs, but also Every Brilliant Thing, 2013, and People, Places and Things, 2015. He has also co-adapted and co-directed George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984, and his upcoming prequel to George Martin's fantasy novel series A Song of Ice and Fire, entitled Game of Thrones, The Mad King, will premiere in July this year in a production by the Royal Shakespeare Company. His theatre is mostly concerned with sociological and philosophical questions. It explores the ambivalences and ambiguities of the human condition through themes such as chronic depression, addiction, moral accountability, and climate change. And so his play Lungs premiered at the Studio Theatre in Washington, D.C. in October 2011, and it had its British debut the same month at the Crucible Theatre in Sheffield under the direction of Richard Wilson. The production won the 2013 Best New Play Award at the Off West End Awards, and it has subsequently been translated into several languages and performed around the world. So the play consists of a running conversation between a man and a woman who form an eco-conscious couple. While they do not have names, they are referred to only as M for man and W for woman in the play script. We learn that she is completing a PhD and she becomes a doctor by the end of the play, while he is a musician who plays occasional gigs but later accepts a more secure full-time job in the corporate sector. And together they grapple with the question of whether to have a child in the context of the climate crisis. So what begins as a conversation in a queue at an IKEA store quickly expands into a wider reflection on love, commitment, parenthood, responsibility, and the future of humanity. Spanning several years of the couple's relationship, the play unfolds through a series of fragmented scenes and rapid temporal shifts that trace their hopes, doubts, arguments, and reconciliations, portraying their ambivalence and indecisiveness in a non-judgmental way. Rather than focusing on external action, it centers on the protagonist's inner conflicts and their attempts to navigate the ethical and emotional implications of bringing new life into an increasingly compromised world. As reviewer Lynn Gardner wrote in The Guardian, the play gives voice to a generation for whom uncertainty is a way of life through two flawed but deeply human people. The play combines humor, intimacy, and existential anxiety, exploring global environmental concerns that permeate private lives and personal choices. It draws a parallel between the lack of guarantees in the young couple's future, so their ability to ensure the relationship's long-term success in the face of adversity, and also the lack of certainty regarding the future of humankind, our ability to sustain life on Earth under the threat of ecological collapse. The second play is Dawn King's The Trials, and she is an English playwright as well, and a screenwriter, who won numerous prizes for her debut play Foxfinder in 2011, which is a dystopian fable that earned recognition as the most promising playwright in 2012. And there was also a screen adaptation. I think it's currently in development. Her other plays include the thriller Ciphers, which explores the darker aspects of human nature, an adaptation of Aldous Huxley's prescient Brave New World in 2015. And most recently, there was an adaptation of Chekhov's classic play, Der Kirchengarten, for stage director Katie Mitchell in 2022, which provided an opportunity to address humanity's destruction of the natural world. So her play, The Trials, debuted in Britain at the Donmar Warehouse in 2022. Anticipating how future generations may judge and condemn our actions and responses, or lack of responses, to the climate crisis, the play has been translated into several languages as well and produced internationally, with the participation of high school students and the staging at the Théâtre du Grand Bleu last March. It was produced by Arnaud Anquer and the Théâtre du Prisme as part of the Youth is Great festival. So the drama follows 12 young people who gather to assess whether, and to what extent, 3 members of their parents' generation are criminally responsible for ruining the world they have inherited. In doing so, The Trials challenges contemporary audiences to contemplate their own failures and accountability by taking into consideration the voice of the yet unborn. At the same time, the play questions the authority of the young jurors and the fairness and purpose of the penalties imposed on the defendants, exploring the fine line between justice and revenge. In this play, King uses speculative fiction to activate our moral imagination as much as our sense of urgency, asking complex questions such as whether guilt and complicity can be graded, and whether remorse and ignorance may legitimately be considered mitigating factors. Flora Wilson-Brown is another figure on the contemporary British playwriting scene. She's a co-founder of Do Not Alight, a theatre company interested in new writing about living in the world today and in telling political stories through a personal lens. She is currently attached to the National Theatre and under commission from the Globe Theatre. In her work, she has a particular interest in exploring, I quote, what happens to small people when big things change, and when global machinations reach normal people, or again, when something massive invades our lives and changes our relationships. Her debut play, I Know, which explores abusive relationships, premiered in 2022, and her stage adaptation of Virginia Woolf's play poem The Waves received its first run in April 2026 to considerable critical acclaim. So The Beautiful Future is Coming is her second play, and it received its first full production last summer at Bristol Old Vic under the direction of Nancy Medina, before transferring to the Travers Theatre for the Edinburgh Festival. This is a climate drama that spans approximately 250 years. It weaves together three interconnected stories set in 1856, 2027, and 2100. And doing so, it explores existential questions surrounding climate change through three women and their relationships. So the play, instead of focusing on scientific facts and political debates, the play explores how the ecological crisis shapes intimate human experiences, particularly love, motherhood, grief, hope, and again, responsibility towards future generations. The play alternates between three distinct timelines and locations. In 1856, New York, scientist Eunice Foote and her husband James discuss her struggles to gain recognition for her discovery that carbon dioxide can warm the atmosphere. In 2027 London, Claire and Dan, two colleagues, fall in love as they work together for a brand seeking to develop a greener image, while extreme weather events and flooding become increasingly common. And in 2011, Svalbard, a pregnant scientist, Anna, and her colleague Malcolm are trapped inside a seed vault during an unprecedented storm as civilization faces environmental collapse. So these stories unfold in parallel, with scenes rapidly shifting between historical periods, and as the play progresses, thematic connections emerge between the women inhabiting each timeline and their shared concern regarding the kind of world future generations will inherit. So in order to represent the ecological catastrophes that the characters are either dreading, witnessing, or experiencing, and to portray their anxious anticipation and also denial of impending catastrophes, these plays depart from the conventions of the well-made play in terms of time, space, action, dramatic structure, and staging. So in my first part, from tipping points to turning points, dramatizing slow violence, delayed action, and eco-paralysis, I will examine the way Lungs, as a climate play, offers a space where the drama stems from the confrontation between a sense of urgency and patterns of decisional avoidance. And I will try and define these words. My second part, after that, will lead me to examine how dramatic space becomes a mental space, in a part called Climate Change and Changing Minds towards the Psychopoetics of the Stage. And if I have enough time to do that, I will use Jean-Pierre Sarrazac's article on what he calls the dramaturgies of possibilities, une dramaturgie des possibles, to examine how climate theatre, and Lungs in particular, moves away from possibilities to probabilities in order to stage uncertainty. So what interests me in particular is the way these plays explore fragmented, multiple, and indeterminate temporalities, because these challenge and at times subvert the traditional integrity of dramatic time, from non-linearity and delayed causality to intergenerationality and the collapse of progressive futurity. And so these changes in the dramatic form can be accounted for by at least two reasons. The first is that the future of humanity has never been more uncertain than it is today. And this forces us to think about the future in terms of interconnected risks, global instability, probabilities, but also irreversibility and loss of control, as well as diffuse responsibility. So not only do we not know exactly what is going to happen, but given the systemic complexity and interdependence of potential catastrophic events, we do not possess the necessary means to predict with greater accuracy and confidence the far-reaching repercussions of their possible unfolding. So the Global Tipping Points Report 2025 was released ahead of COP30, and it is a major international scientific assessment coordinated through the University of Exeter, with contributions from more than 160 researchers from dozens of institutions worldwide. And it argues that climate change is not always gradual, and that once certain thresholds are crossed, environmental change can accelerate independently of future human actions. And because environmental and human systems are interconnected, crossing one tipping point in a given sector may increase the likelihood of triggering other tipping points in different systems, and thus creating what researchers call cascading tipping points. So it says, I will just read the second paragraph, that Earth system tipping points create diverse and interconnected risks that are different to other climate impacts, often characterized by irreversibility, deep uncertainty, and potential for cascading failures across natural and human systems. And so the problem is that although we expect more frequent and more severe environmental catastrophes in the very near future, and although we know that the current trajectory of global human activity and resource consumption will have severe and irreversible consequences, the risks and the timing of these events remain difficult to assess. So while it may not yet be too late to avoid crossing these thresholds, it is becoming increasingly likely that we will. And the probabilities increases with every passing year. And at the same time, we require unconventional assessment tools in order to be able to assess properly these probabilities. So that's what the report also argues. The authors claim that new approaches are needed, saying that traditional risk assessment fails for Earth system tipping points. Conventional impact probability matrices capturing individual climate impacts are inappropriate for tipping point risk analysis due to uncertainty, nonlinear dynamics, and the systemic scale and scope of interactions between impacts and their cascading effects. And these key elements precisely provide the foundational principles of climate playwriting. As eco-drama similarly tend to reject conventional dramatic structures as inappropriate for capturing and staging this new paradigm, uncertainty, nonlinear dynamics, and the systemic scale and scope of the interactions between the characters' decisions and the effects of these decisions, all these are used as dramatic tools to inform the shape and language of the plays. And they are performed on stage through a variety of narrative and theatrical strategies. So in a foundational article on the cascade effect, also known as the ripple effect or domino effect, Lawrence explains that climate change impacts and implications propagate as cascades across physical and human systems, compounding to form multiple impacts across sectors. And such effects arise because of the interdependencies between natural and socio-economic systems as they change and from feedback loops that occur between them. And so this is a fundamental concept for shedding light on the unprecedented level of complexity of identifying a distinct and separate responsibility for system failures across sectors. And the second reason why eco-theatre tends to break with the traditional linearity of dramatic time and instead use fragmented narratives is a consequence of all of this. And it is that our cognitive, ethical, and emotional capacities struggle to comprehend the immensity of the issue at stake and to respond to the crisis in a coherent and cohesive way. So in response to this indeterminate probabilistic nature of the future, and in the plays we will see that the models such as may, might, can are everywhere. In response of this, which in the threatening context of the climate crisis generates deep-rooted uncertainty, the plays explore the indecisive posture of the characters themselves, which manifests itself through hesitation and paralysis, that is to say, the difficulty of making choices. Their judgments, beliefs, decision-making processes, behaviors, and actions are challenged and pressured in unprecedented ways, again, both collectively and on a personal level. And this leads the characters to oscillate between awareness and avoidance, to experience varying degrees of acknowledgement and denial, to move back and forth between catastrophizing and minimization, and to engage in either focused or delayed action, thus employing a variety of coping mechanisms. And as they internalize the threats hanging over the future of humanity, which trigger both their sense of insecurity and their sense of responsibility, they are confronted with choices whose consequences they struggle both to grasp cognitively and to assume ethically. And as a result, their perception of time is challenged, distorted, reconfigured, and it becomes devoted to the development of tacit stress management strategies that reveal not only their emotional dysregulation, but also the systemic slow violence operating behind the scenes, which triggers these responses. So about slow violence, Rob Nixon wrote a book where he argues that this phenomenon of slow violence occurs gradually and out of sight, and that it is a violence of delayed destruction dispersed across time and space. A violence of delayed destruction, an attritional violence that is typically not viewed as violence at all. Violence is customarily conceived as an event or action that is immediate in time, explosive, and spectacular in space, and as erupting into instant sensational visibility. We need, I believe, to engage a different kind of a different kind of violence, a violence that is neither spectacular nor instantaneous, but rather incremental and accretive. Its calamitous repercussions are playing out across a range of temporal scales. In so doing, he says, we also need to engage the representational, narrative, and strategic challenges posed by the relative invisibility of slow violence. Climate change, the thawing cryosphere, toxic drift, biomagnification, deforestation, the radioactive aftermaths of wars, acidifying oceans, and a host of other slowly unfolding environmental catastrophes present formidable representational obstacles that can hinder our efforts to mobilize and act decisively. These calamities, Nixon says, are not the kind of calamities that we can easily represent and perceive on a daily basis. And so therefore they are difficult to stage using traditional methods, as they do not provide the expected sensationalism of conventional drama. So by contrast, contemporary climate theatre can be understood as an attempt to render visible these forms of slow violence that structure everyday life, while often remaining imperceptible as dramatic events. And in eco-dramas, as the characters are caught in a system that they know is approaching a threshold, they tend to recognize that their decisions have a performative function and constitute potential watershed moments, even though the cascading consequences of their actions, and also inactions, may be delayed and remain out of sight. So if, as the Green Building Council Australia defines it, a tipping point is the moment just before a system crosses a threshold and change becomes irreversible, a turning point is what happens when we decide to act. And climate change plays tend to revolve around the encounter between these two dimensions, building dramatic tension through their confrontation. As they approach a tipping point in a slow but potentially irreversible process, the decisions that the characters could make are experienced as potential turning points, with which they are profoundly uncomfortable. And this leads the drama to consist largely of delayed action, as a plurality of scenarios, options, and perspectives are contemplated, analysed, and assessed. So knowing that these processes are nonetheless taking place is a major factor in eco-anxiety, along with uncertainty, unpredictability, and uncontrollability, as pointed out by Panu Pikala in his review article Anxiety and the Ecological Crisis. Another definition of eco-anxiety is that it is a chronic fear of environmental doom, or as Glenn Albrecht writes, it is the generalized sense that the ecological foundations of existence are in the process of collapse. And so eco-anxiety is an emotional response to anticipated ecological loss and its long-term impacts on the future of humanity. And it may in turn trigger what could be called eco-paralysis, which I would define as a state in which anxiety, fear, guilt, or overwhelm generated by the environmental crisis impedes an individual's capacity to make decisions or undertake meaningful actions. And so in Lungs, Duncan Macmillan's play, the dilemma faced by the protagonists echoes these definitions, since the prospect of parenthood constantly forces them to imagine the environmental conditions that their future child may both inherit and impact. So while they possess knowledge of the environmental crisis, they struggle to translate that knowledge into clear action because of the emotional weight of this awareness and the uncertainty regarding the impact of their decision. And this causes breaks in their narratives and personal course of action, because it complicates projection into the future. So rather than acting, this climate anxiety-induced avoidance creates disruptive patterns. The characters tend to postpone decisions and discussions, to disengage from information, to avoid future planning, and to defer commitments. And to highlight this suspension of action as the main drama, Lungs abandons conventional realism in favor of a minimalist, in favor of a minimalist setting, broken dialogue, and a fragmented narrative structure, exploring the erosion of individual decision-making under conditions of uncertainty. So, as indicated in the script, the play is written to be performed on a bare stage. There is no scenery, no furniture, no props and no mime. There are no costume changes. Light and sound should not be used to indicate a change in time or place. And the letters W and M are not character names. Any program materials should simply list the actors and not who they are playing. So this systemic removal of all the stage elements and theatrical convention that what one would traditionally expect aims to put the focus on what is going on in the interactional space between the characters. While it is stripped of its traditional spectacularity, the bare stage supports the play's attempt to make the invisible visible. by erasing any references outside the cultural framework of the audience that might diminish our ability to relate to the protagonist, the minimalism of the setting and the adaptability of the script aim to facilitate identification and projection while also creating a distancing effect. It also reduces the play to its essence, that is, language, as by contrast, the couple's dialogue is quite naturalistic, even though they speak a lot faster than one would expect, which conveys actually a sense of urgency. And so this movement towards abstraction operates a form of radical delocalization that also suggests that the main action takes place in the minds of the couple. And this leads me to my second part. So to use the words of British playwright Martin Krimp, the play's dramatic space here appears to be a mental space. Talking about the specific way he wrote his most famous play, Attempt on Her Life, in 1997, Krimp explains that in this second kind of writing, the dramatic space is a mental space, not a physical one. The consumer citizen of a liberal democracy generally experiences, and is encouraged to experience, the world as a set of private choices and personal pleasures. So perhaps this drama in the head is simply a reflection of this state of affairs. And in another interview, he explained that his interest in exploring mental spaces reflects a contemporary phenomenon and is part of a broader movement. He says, "I do think part of modern identity is to live inside our heads, a bit like being shut in a car, endlessly driving. In the 19th century, the theatre abandoned the street and moved into the tortured drawing rooms of Ibsen and Feydeau, and in the 20th, Pinter and Beckett transformed it into a mental space, which some writers, the Cain of Crave and 448 Psychosis, continued to explore." And this echoes Macmillan's words when he says, "Most of what I want to say isn't particularly coherent. It's about trying to find a form to articulate an anxiety or concern I have. My plays all have some internal contradiction that I can't resolve." And that's what drama is, watching a character make a decision. The thematic, the intellectual, they're all secondary to seeing a recognizable character wrestling with something really difficult. So Macmillan's purpose in experimenting with theatrical form is to adapt the shape and language of his plays to the inner conflict, or drama in the head, that he's working with as a source material. And in Lungs, as the characters examine when, how, why, and even whether it is ever right to have a child in a time of ecological crisis, the multiple options and projections they imagine, envision, and ponder allow them to move. Someone can make sure I'm going to just switch this on. Yeah, it's working, I think. Should be. Yes, in Lungs, the characters examine when, how, and why, but also whether it is ever right to have a child in a time of ecological crisis. And the multiple options and projections that they imagine, envision, and ponder allow them to move mentally from one possible future to another, and to explore alternative worlds through imagination and language. And so that exchange is filled with striking images and comparisons and scenarios drawn from catastrophic discourse. At some point, for instance, the man says, "It's just disaster scenarios playing out in my head." But they also share the excitement and the insecurities around the unknown, which again contrast with the minimalism of the set design. So as a result, fiction is the main action of the play. It is used as a central tool for reflection and the difficult processes of decision-making and conception in which the protagonists engage and which they struggle to bring to completion. Eco-paralysis thus generates a form of mental looping in which speculation leads to counterfactual narratives and spiraling forms of anticipation that gives the play its structure. The purpose of all this, however, is clear. The characters need to reach an agreement and plan their future. And so they need to decide upon their course of action. And as a result, the dramatic space is not only a mental space, it is an intersubjective decisional space, where critical analysis, self-reflection, and emotional co-regulation do not replace the action, they are the play's action. And the very process and decision of having a conversation are both performed and commented upon. And so I will show you, if I can, a short excerpt so that you can actually see and hear how this is done.
I was just thinking.
Can we just... We will talk about it, but
Yeah.
not right now, I'm too...
Me too.
Can I drive?
Of course.
You can play your demo and let me hear your songs.
Not finished.
Okay, well, let's just sit here and not say anything then, okay? Just be silent. Just not have to deal with this right away, because
Good.
I don't have the...
It's okay. And if you want to talk about it, we can.
No, okay, good, yeah. Just not now. I don't have anything to say about it right now, because it's such a shock. It's such an enormous... You can't just say something like that to someone. You can't just say that to me and expect me to be fine and rational and clear-headed and not...
the right time to
Oh,
mention.
I don't know, I don't have the answers. I just know that wasn't it.
I shouldn't have said anything.
No, you're right. You're right, you are. It is something that we should... We should be, yeah, talking about, because, fuck, we're not getting
I know.
any younger.
No. So are we talking about it, or...
No. Yeah.
What?
You were saying, with what? What were you saying?
I've said it all.
Well, then say it again, because I couldn't hear you the first time, because people were staring.
All right, so as you can hear, the numerous metalinguistic statements, such as, I shouldn't have said anything, you can't just say that to me, we should be talking about it, what were you saying, I'm not asking a question, you're starting a conversation, I didn't say anything, I'm just thinking out loud. All these remarks do not simply punctuate and fracture the dialogue and the process, the decision-making process. They are systemic and constitutive of the dialogue. They inform the discussion and they perform the relationship by providing a sort of communicative modality through which the relationship is experienced, tested, and consolidated. But as markers of resistance, these comments also trigger confrontation and conflict while making the conversation happen. So if the discussion unfolds in a chaotic and fragmented way, this push and pull movement is a reflection of their inner struggles and emotional states. In particular, the woman's numerous remarks on the way they should or should not address the idea of becoming parents and on the right moment for having this conversation, all this has a performative function. While she tends to oscillate between projective blame and self-justification, her comments serve as a coping mechanism, a delaying strategy that she uses to avoid confronting the main implications of the issue head-on and to give herself the time to process her thoughts and regulate her emotions. What we could call her bad faith here mainly reveals her deep-rooted insecurities and her need for reassurance. So the dramatic irony in the contradiction between her saying, I don't have anything to say, and the fact that she then proceeds to deliver a very long, convoluted, and elliptical stream of consciousness type of monologue conveys her unresolved anxiety, and especially when she turns to ecological considerations. And so I'll show you this in the second clip here.
Loud. I'm thinking I'm talking.
I didn't say anything.
We're having a conversation.
Yes.
That's all that's happening.
Look, let's go home and drink some gin and pretend I never said anything.
And the
I
planet.
don't want ice. Take my ice.
The planet, because you worry about the same things I do. You care about the same...
Do I?
And they say, don't they? If you really care about the planet, like if you really care about the future of mankind, then don't have children.
Do they?
I mean, what they really say is that if you care about the planet, then kill yourself. But I'm I mean, I'm not going to do that. So, because there's what? There's almost 8 billion people. There's just too many people. And there's not enough of everything. So the right thing to do, the ethical thing to do, is not to contribute to that, particularly people like us.
People like...
Car driving, plastic bag using, aerosol spraying, avocado importing, Western...
We're good people.
Exactly, we are. Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are good. Are we?
You can't think about that stuff.
No, I know. It's not our responsibility. Anyway, I mean, so much about it's unknown. And what if this kid, what if this hypothetical he or she, like this imaginary little Edwin or Hannah?
Edwin.
What if he or she was the one to work it all out and save everything, everyone, the planet, polar bears, Bangladesh? We don't know.
So how do you factor that in?
Exactly. Or we could plant forests. We could work out the carbon footprint of all the expanding nappies in the landfill and the baby gap being imported from the Congo or wherever, and we could plant trees. Entire forests. We could create something pure and oxygenating.
But the world is going to need good people in it. With it.
Yeah, so in this particular scene, what's interesting is the way that the woman starts with this notion of if you care, so conditional statement, if you care about the planet, if you care about the future of humanity, then you shouldn't have children, to the point of you should even maybe kill yourself logically. So she uses an ethical statement that's based on logic and mathematics to reject the idea, theoretically, of having children. But then she moves to the indicative, to the present tense, and says it's not our responsibility, and so much about it is unknown. So the first being a judgment, not our responsibility, and the second being a statement, we don't know so many things. And then she also moves from negation to affirmation when she says, what if, using the conditional present, what if the child were the person to save the world? What if we gave birth to a person that would fix everything? And there's an implicit answer to this rhetorical question, which is then that then maybe things would be okay, and then maybe then we would be doing the right things, and this would make things right. So this sort of justification through wishful thinking leads the audience to sort of follow the couple's interpersonal disagreements and tensions to actually witness the construction of an intimate mental and emotional space where reason and feelings, facts and desires, wants and behaviors are in conflict more than the characters. They share, actually, the similar ecological concerns and relational aspirations, despite the fact that their relationship will undergo a series of rupture and repair. So as the actual drama plays out in the minds of the characters who struggle to translate reflection into action, they tend to become trapped in recursive cycles of anticipation, repeatedly imagining, revising, and reassessing possible futures in the form of we could statements, we could do this or that, and what if scenarios, which they then confront with ethical considerations expressed through should statements. But this also opens up possibilities. This we could expresses either hope or denial, but probably both. And in her 2016 book, Staying with the Trouble, Donna Haraway argues against both denial and fatalism, asking, how can we think in times of urgencies without the self-indulgent and self-fulfilling myths of apocalypse? Just moving on a little bit here, I wanted to talk about this image of breathing in the play. So the title is called Lungs, because this process of breathing becomes in the play a sort of metaphor which is multifaceted. The image is actually present across the 3 plays that I wanted to talk about today. Breath is not only does not only refer to air pollution, obviously it does, and global warming, but it also refers here to childbirth, taking one's first breath, and to death. Also, the characters, one of them smokes at the beginning of the play and then starves, quits, and the other one picks up after that. So the notion of being responsible for your own health is also present, since air pollution becomes not only collective but also an individual decision, basically. So to counteract this, the characters talk a lot also about planting trees, planting forests. So at the beginning of the play, as we've just seen, the notion of planting forest is a possibility, something that they could do. Then later on, it becomes something that they should do. We should plant some trees. But then, slowly, by the end of the play, we realize that this becomes a decision. The man says, we'll just try to do the right thing, because we're good people, right? And we'll plant forests, I mean it. We'll cycle everywhere, we'll grow our own food if we have to, we'll never take another plane, we'll just stay right there, and we'll plant forests, you and me. You and me and the little speck, the 10,000 tons of CO2 waiting to be unleashed onto the planet. What happens at the end of the play, and I will just quote the woman's words here, is that his forests have gone, now using the indicative and the present perfect. Everything, she says, is covered in ash, but I'm okay. Listen to me moaning on. It's a nice cool day today, like we used to have. Fresh air, no sirens, no noise, nothing, it's good. Anyway, I just thought I'd stop by, change the flowers. So we move from the possibility of having these huge, beautiful forests to just changing the flowers on his tomb, obviously. So what's also interesting is that at the end of the play, the birth of their child is staged at the first vignette in a very fast-paced series of life moments that are briefly staged or alluded to, which give the action a sort of surreal and dreamlike quality. I'll just show you that.
Okay.
Breathe.
Oh, they're getting more frequent.
Every few minutes.
Get the keys.
We're here.
Don't leave me.
I'm right here.
Scared.
You're so brave.
Hurt.
I forgot my camera.
Here it comes.
He's so beautiful.
Let me hold him.
I'm so tired.
It's your turn.
Shall I bring him in with us?
Oh, he has to settle.
I know.
The books all say so.
Good marks all round.
I'm so proud of him.
I forgot my camera.
Oh, there he goes.
Don't cry.
He's never slept away from home.
We're going to be okay.
You shouldn't let him see that.
I'll talk to him.
He needs to hear it from his father.
Are we going up this weekend?
I just want to see him off before he goes. What with the world as it is?
I know.
Have you got your camera?
Let's get married.
I do.
We need to be prepared.
It's not going to be as bad as they're
He
saying.
hasn't called.
They suspended all flights.
It's so hot.
The planet's fucked.
He looks so different.
He says he wants to help out.
We're okay.
That's what I told him.
It's a standard operation.
I know.
Just goes with old age.
He's going to drive you.
I'm okay.
I'm scared.
You're fine.
Yep, so the acceleration of time here, with the increased fragmentation of the narrative, the absence of transitions, and the collage of scenes supposed to take place years apart, provide a sort of post-Brechtian epic quality to the final part of the play, which is very heavily emotionally loaded. They produce a distancing effect while also underlining the endurance of hope and also threat and fear throughout the character's lifetime. In the play, Macmillan turns the stage into a space for staying with the trouble, to use the title of Donna Haraway's book again, a space where possibilities, probabilities, and responsibilities continuously confront one another. And this leads me to my final part, in which I'll examine how Lungs, as a climate play, illustrates a theatre of uncertainty, where possibilities are haunted by probabilities, which re-establish a sense of linear temporality, renew our relation to causality, yet still fundamentally reject the determinism of tragedy. So I have a series of quotations from this very interesting article by Jean-Pierre Sarrazac, which is Écriture dramatique contemporaine, le jeu des possibles. So he reminds us that for Aristotle, the plot is founded on the concatenation of actions in order to ensure the hero's passage from happiness to misfortune, or vice versa. Brechtian practice, by contrast, proceeds through a complete fragmentation of the plot. From Brecht onward, and indeed much earlier, from the turn of the century, from Strindberg, perhaps even from Büchner-Woyzeck, dramaturgical work no longer consists in linking events together until the resolution, but rather in separating them from one another, in segmenting them according to their contradictory possibilities, in breaking the chain of actions, in unchaining, multiplying, and pluralizing the possibles of the plot. He says that theatre is the site of the invention of possibles, that possibles represent the utopian horizon against which today's dramaturgies take shape. To write and make theatre, he says, is to a large extent to give play to possibles. He then quotes François Jacob saying, whether for groups or individuals, all human life involves a continuous dialogue between what could be and what is, a subtle mixture of belief, knowledge, and imagination constantly constructs before our eyes an ever-changing image of the possible. It is against this image that we measure our desires and our fears. It is upon this possible that we model our behavior and our actions. So what I think is really interesting is that, obviously, eco-theatre, climate theatre, could be regarded as a dramaturgy of possibilities. Pretty much all of what he says here makes sense when applied to lungs, for instance. And in the report I mentioned earlier, this notion of possibility is everywhere as well, to encourage us to think about the changes that we can make to avoid the worst case scenarios. For instance, we have this notion that deliberate actions can enable positive tipping by neutralizing balancing feedback, promoting reinforcing feedback, and helping make a desired change the most affordable, accessible, and/or attractive option. System interactions can create opportunities for positive tipping cascades, whereby tipping in one sector can increase the likelihood of tipping in another, etc. However, the notion of this dramaturgy of possibilities also implies that everything is actually open and forms some sort of loop whereby the characters retrospectively imagine how their life could have been different with no judgment. And this notion of judgment, I think, is very important here, because in climate theatre, it is quite the opposite. Self-judgment, self-defense, blame, accusations, looking for who's responsible for what, is at the heart of the reflection, and this is why characters are engaged in these, what I call these should statements, where they envision all the things that they should be doing instead of what can happen, could happen, may happen. So instead of a dramaturgy of possibilities, I think it is better to speak of a dramaturgy of probabilities, to define climate theatre, the theatre of uncertainty. And this notion of probability is also present everywhere in the report and all in the scientific reports on climate change and global warming. For instance, we have selected a few passages where they say that we have high confidence that ice sheets have warming tipping points leading to irreversible collapse. Or we have later on, it is it is unlikely, like the Arctic summer sea ice is unlikely to reach tipping points. The use of models such as may and could go along with this notion of having high, medium or low confidence in potentialities. So maybe I can just end on this note and say that by dramatizing these forms of decision eco-paralysis, that is the inability to make choices under conditions of uncertainty, and also execution eco-paralysis, which is different. This is the inability to translate intentions, commitments, and decisions into sustained action because of some sort of emotional overload, anxiety, anticipatory grief. The play Lungs demonstrates how climate fiction explores functional disruption, climate distress, and slow violence in a way that opens up new directions in contemporary British playwriting. And Lungs in particular, along with other climate change plays, develops a kind of theatre that, faced with unprecedented historical conditions, experiments with forms and moves beyond Sarrazak's dramaturgy of possibilities to develop instead a theatre of uncertainty haunted by probabilities, which is better apt, in my opinion, to address the challenge identified by Donna Haraway of learning how to stay with the trouble. Thank you. And just for reference, I've got a few books here and studies on eco-theatre and climate dramaturgy, and even though I haven't really addressed these and used these, I just wanted to mention that it is an emerging field, and we've got lots of very recent publications and upcoming publications that are going to develop the definition of what eco-theatre is.
So may we start again for time for questions and discussion, rather, perhaps. Thank you so much, Solange. That was very rich, very detailed, very much informed. I learned many things, and it brought also questions, of course, but images in my mind. I would like just to say first, before asking you a few questions, that I think you very well explained and displayed how theatre is a space, an important space in the vast sphere in the vast debate on climate. And this discipline, this genre, which is theatre or drama, brings deep reflections on this subject of climate change and environmental questions. It does not only inform, but it makes thoughts alive on a stage in a direct dialogue with an audience, not only readers. And it is the capacity that theatre has compared to other fictions, and especially anglophone theatre. You've mentioned Martin Crimp, who is a contemporary actor, but you've also mentioned Beckett, and I'm thinking also of Carol Churchill, who are, yes, as far as Churchill is concerned, still alive, but a rather old playwright now. So the capacity theatre has to be active in the field and to engage this dialogue with the readers, okay, but mainly with the public or with the audience. So perhaps to start with, I would like to come back, to refer to what you said on the coping mechanism you've mentioned, or when you explain the domino effect and the use of models. So in the language, how there is this coping mechanism which is explored. Is there a specificity, you would say, in the way the language is used, really? So you've referred to lungs especially, but perhaps you would have other examples in the other place. How really the language is an expression of the stress, perhaps, or the anxiety, yes, mainly of the people. Is it really so pregnant in the language, or?
Well, yes, thank you so much, because I think it is really important and central in the way that playwrights think how they're going to use language in order to convey this sense of emergency, urgency, and also the characters struggle to both regulate their emotions. So from an emotional standpoint, how do we cope with this chronic anxiety and this feeling of powerlessness, and also the shame or the guilt, knowing that we do have some responsibility, and the problem is to what extent are we responsible for what is going on? So there's this constant dialogue between the individual responsibilities and collective responsibilities, and this creates a great stress on our nervous systems. And we can see and hear this in the dialogues, because the characters really struggle not only with informing their thoughts and opinions, but also, communicating about them in a way that is rational. We can have emotions and still be able to talk about them in a rational, calm way. But with eco-anxiety, it seems to become even more difficult. And another thing that they struggle with, that we all struggle with, is not only the emotional load, which is different for everyone, but it is the difficulty to actually know and have these probabilistic models that can really give us some more information on the timing, the conditions surrounding the catastrophes that are looming. And so not really knowing what's going to happen, and also not really knowing how to respond to this uncertainty, this creates a magnitude of stress that is unprecedented. And so in terms of coping mechanisms, we've got lots of denial and also compartmentation, whereby the characters sometimes do acknowledge that they should do something in a certain way and follow a certain path, and at times they refuse to engage in these considerations. So in the play, for example, in Lungs, at some point, the woman says, can we just not think about the planet for a moment? Can we just forget about it and just live in our own little bubble just for once? And so they oscillate between these different postures. And I think we all tend to do that, sometimes be disillusioned, angry, but also, desperate, hopeless, and at times feeling like we can do something, we can change things. And so what's different in climate theatre is really that there's this sort of looping where we constantly, or we might move from one posture to another. And I think language reflects that by this use of models in the English language, which is clearly, I think it's very fascinating the way they are going to have the same sentence, but just change the model, like the modality. We should, or we could, I want, or I must. All of these expressions, they are absolutely critical I think, when we're dealing or addressing climate change and how we should respond to it. So the theatre is clearly using that to inform and shape the language of the place. And also all the range of emotions. So, for instance, in the trials, obviously, this is why I talked about judgment and expressing what we think should be done. In the trials, the characters are pretty young. They are teenagers, and so they go through lots of very wide range of emotions: anger, disinterest, confusion, and also they change their minds constantly. So as they have to decide whether the defendants are guilty or not, and the defendants are just a mirror for the audience to identify with. So as they've been asked to give a sentence, give a verdict, they have to decide where they stand and who's responsible for what. And some of the kids are really angry and find that everyone is guilty and that they should all be sentenced to death. And others find that no one is guilty and that they would be criminals if they condemned their parents to death because they didn't act accordingly to what maybe we all should have done or be doing. And so the fight between, or the disagreements between the kids are the place where each one of them needs to develop a certain coping mechanism and a strategy to accept that they might not give the right verdict in the end, and also accept that this is not going to change the world that they have inherited. So I'm not sure if this answers your question, but I think it is very interesting to study these mechanisms because it has also a function that's very important for the audience, which is to go into this introspective journey and question their own actions and look at what are the coping mechanisms that we are using in our daily lives to deal with this stress.
Thank you. Yes, this is a very clever answer and detailed answer as well. In fact, I was also thinking about the modality of the theatre itself, which is a space of action, which is supposed to be a space of action, but we see that in most recent plays, there is no real action on stage, apart perhaps the trials where indeed, well, I saw the extract you sent me, where there are movements on stage, there are lots of actors on stage, which is not really today there aren't many actors on stage for obvious reasons, but there in the trials there are many on stage and they move but it is, however, based on verbal discussions or exchanges and not really on things that are done physically. And I think there is a paradox in a way in the field of drama that we have such a political question, social question, which is developed, and you also showed critical essays and books on the topic, like you said, climate theatre. I looked for these books as well. I looked for books that dealt with the question, and I found the Cambridge Companion. Where is it? Cambridge Companion to Literature and Climate, and in that important reference, there was only one chapter out of 16 on theatre, in which it is said that yes, theatre is really dealing with the question of climate. So yeah, this paradox of referring, trying to explain, trying to reflect on and as I said, reflective question on climate on a stage is quite puzzling. But as you've shown with the extracts, and as we see with particularly the beautiful Futures Coming, there is a scenography. So there is something spectacular.
Yeah.
There is something to see more than to hear only.
Yeah.
And that was also part of my question. How can we make theatre out of such a verbal, verbose matter?
Yeah.
And how also can we make theatre that is not only pessimistic?
Yes.
Lungs ends in a rather tragic mode, but I saw that in the trials, and I think also the other one is not particularly stressful. You know, we don't want to go to the theatre only to cry or to leave the space, the theatrical space with tears or being even more depressed.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
and I think that is definitely a challenge, but a very interesting one. Is first, how do you make this interesting and alive on a stage? And second, how do you deal with these issues without negatively impacting your audience? Because I suppose this is not the point. So it's this fine line between bringing more awareness to these issues and also encouraging people into, you know, maybe changing a few things here and there, or even make bigger changes in their lives. So there is a form of activism in certain places. Like, for instance, in the trials, Dawn King, she clearly makes an activist statement by saying at the beginning, just before the play starts, she says that, she asks the producers to take positive action against the environmental harm caused by the rehearsal and production of the play. So this notion of trying to encourage both the theatre world and the audiences to act accordingly with the matter of the play is a challenge when you are dealing with depressing issues or questions. But I think that is also why some productions and some playwrights won't just have a bare stage. So this is what Macmillan does, but usually the setting remains quite minimalistic. At least it's not realistic. There's nothing really naturalistic in the way the stage design is built. But still, the main action remains language in most plays. So that's true for the trials. But these are kids as well. So of course the show is going to be energetic, and the young jurors are going to move around, to interact with each other, to flirt, to go to the toilet, to open the window to get some fresh air. So there is going to be movement because they are in a room, in a space where indeed there's a lot of pressure upon them, moral pressure, and so they need distraction. So for instance, at some point they are going to eat ice cream, or we see them having lunch, because we need this sort of, not comic relief, but some sort of relief anyway, to release the pressure. So playwrights are going to use different strategies to stage this and to show how we try to cope. And for the kids in the trials, for instance, they need breaks, obviously, because it's such a huge responsibility. So some of them want to go very quickly through the process, others want to take their time. So again, the question of the timing, the pace is essential here, because there's a sense of urgency, but at the same time, we need time to make these decisions. We need time to gather the information necessary to make an informed judgment. So yeah, I'm not sure I've answered your question, but I think it's interesting how they all use different strategies. But in the end, what we really see performed on stage is some sort of distress and also some sort of performed hope through the way we can change maybe our representations.
And how would you perhaps link that or make it specific? I mean, is this theatre very specific now? So you have one of the plays is, well, Lungs is 2011.
2011, yes.
It's quite rather close, but if you put this in the vast chronology of the last decades, in which you have also studied a lot for your PhD thesis, but even after Sarah Kane's theatre, Martin Krimp's, this in-your-face theatre that you've called in-your-head theatre, also we'll come back to this, the fact that it is something inside that is put outside on a stage, but in the vast field of drama, of contemporary drama, would you say that this the specificity of these plays dealing with a topical issue, not so topical in a way, because in fact environmental questions were also a part of their times, but of previous times. But how does it make it different? Is it something that is famous at the moment? I mean, do they have success? They have been rewarded, but is it something that is really developing? That it tends to be even more developed in the future?
Well, that is such a good question, because you mentioned Carol Churchill earlier, and I think she's definitely a precursor of this sort of theatre dealing with the environment and our relation to the future of humanity in terms of our relationship with nature. So she wrote a play called Not Enough Oxygen, but the most famous play that she wrote that is usually associated with early climate theatre is Far Away, in which at the end of the play there are these very absurdist images where, different animal species have somehow taken control of the planet, and so she wrote it in the 90s, I think. So it was not yet a climate change and global warming and all the theories that have emerged over the past decade, and even just over the past 5 years. These did not exist at the time, so the issue was not central as it is now in this place, and the reflection was not as advanced as it is now. They didn't have all the scientific facts, and so it was not central as it is now. And so I believe that climate theatre right now is really emerging as a major movement. Quite obviously, it's just a reflection of state of affairs of what is going on in the world right now. So I expect more plays, and I expect more experiments with form to deal with these issues. But yes, you also mentioned Sarah Kane, and I like to quote what she said when she wrote Blasted. So Blasted was her first play, and she wrote it in the 90s during the war in Eastern Europe. And she was interested in, just staging the story of a couple in a luxury hotel room. And then she watched the news on TV, and she saw this live footage of a woman begging for help in the Balkans. And she thought, well, how can I still write a play about this couple in a luxury hotel in Leeds when this is what I should be writing about? The war and what is going on right now in Europe, and not stay isolated in this English-British bubble of an island. And so she had this realization that she did not need to choose between writing a play about a couple in a hotel room in Leeds and writing a play about the war. She thought that she could totally bring the two together in one and the same play, because she says one is the seed and the other is the tree. So using an ecological metaphor to explain that violence is born in the domestic sphere. Its roots is in our relationship with one another, within the family unit, within the couple. So the way we treat each other in this private sphere is going to be reflected on a much larger scale. So war, to a certain extent, is just an expansion of the way we treat each other in our own lives, everyday lives. And so this is why in her play she decided to have this soldier enter in the hotel room, and a bomb just making everything turn to ruins and rumbles, and so war erupts within the play. And of course the play at the time caused scandal. It was a huge controversy. There was a huge controversy around it because of all the violence in this play, and that it didn't make sense at all. But to her it was completely coherent. And I think today this is what we realize now, that everything is interconnected. And what climate change also teaches us is that every ecosystem, every system depends on each other. And we have this sort of, again, cascade effect or domino effect that explains it perfectly. And science has been also developing a theoretical framework to explain these phenomena. So I think today we are better informed to make climate plays, but at the time, in the 90s, in 2000, there was already this idea that everything is interconnected somehow, and I think this is where this ecological approach to things took roots, but it is expanding right now, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. I think there are questions online.
If you stop sharing your screen, we can see, because Christine has her camera on. So.
I have other questions, of course, but it's nice if we have people reacting, or if perhaps on this.
If I may ask a question.
Yeah, sure, Christine, you can.
Yes.
Following up on what you said, I'm sorry, there is some echo. I don't know why.
I don't know. How can we?
I'll make it short. I was very interested by what you said about the use of models. We could, we should, we could, or even we can, leading to Barack Obama's yes, we can. And I think this is one of the. Do you have an idea what there is such echo? What I could do to avoid it?
I have no idea.
You analyze this part of the play in lungs when they're having a very tense and emotionally loaded discussion about having a baby or not. And I found this deeply moving because if you analyze precisely not so much the words but the language of the bodies, the man who has a very protective posture, even looking away from the woman, and the more they talk, the more they will come closer, and he will have the body language that is much more open. He will look at her, and at one point he simply completely opens up. He lies down, but he looks relaxed. And I think we do need such moments when we can project ourselves in having as relaxed and as clear-sighted a discussion between ourselves about what faces us. And it made me think of this whole thing about what we should do, what we could do, what we can do, even though there's this irony that it ends with just changing the flowers, which is very sarcastic. But on the other hand, if you think of people like photojournalist Sebastião Salgado, Vincent is in the documentary film on his work. At one point, he felt all his positive energy had been taken up by his war reporting, and he needed to do something himself, not just witness harrowing warfare and something going to its apocalyptic end. And he decided to simply plant trees back in Brazil, and he funded an association that he sent money to. And if I remember right, he planted some 2 million trees at least. So I think that sometimes it looks like not much, just words, but if something clicks in the minds of the people watching the play, they can feel so powerful because, as you said, one seed is very small, but millions of seeds being planted everywhere will become trees over time. And this idea of breathing the lungs, coming and going between stress, a desire for escapism or denial, but at other moments you have more energy. And this couple, even though the ending is quite disillusioned, they take the big leap. They have a child. So I personally think this gives very positive energy to young generations, and they need such a space for emotional release and for confronting their fears and seeing what the odds are for the positive and the negative, and what leeway they have. So thank you very much. That was fascinating, and sorry for not being there right from the beginning. We had a very important meeting for our future master students to get them grants, so didn't miss that.
No,
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine, and of course, no worries at all. Oh, is it? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Christine, and I'm really happy you were able to at least participate via Zoom, and thank you so much for your question. It is indeed so interesting to watch the characters in Lungs move around as well. And when I was talking about the importance of language and the focus on language, of course there's verbal language, but there's also body language. And you're absolutely right, because in this relational dynamics between the two characters, what is going on is, sorry, the relationship being performed and, as I said, consolidated. And this has a lot to do with the way they behave physically with one another as well. And at some point, she's very angry, she's very anxious, and he reassures her, and this is when he says, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll plant the trees, and then she answers, thank you, I really needed that. So what she actually needed was some sort of reassurance, either verbal or physical. At some point, he asks her, but what do you really want? And she just says, I just really want a hug. And so this is just as much important as what they actually say, maybe even more. And I think you're right. What is happening here is also how can we perform hope on stage to also show that we can live with this uncertainty. We are not doomed to go and kill ourselves or decide not to have children, but of course, it's up to the audience to make their own, decisions. But there is hope in all these plays as well, and this is why actually one of the plays I wanted to talk about, the beautiful future is coming. This title is not entirely ironic. A lot of reviewers have said that this brings a lot of hope to the audience, even though there are, events in the play that are not easy to deal with as well. But still, the message behind this is that things are interconnected, and we can actually create change using the same domino effect, because there exists tipping points of danger, but equally we have tipping points of opportunity, which is what the report I was quoting earlier, this is what they also say in it. They say that if we start making change, even if it's very minimal, even if it's small, it can, cascade into, much more positive change that we can even imagine, because, again, we cannot measure how much or how or when things will go in one way or another. So yes, thank you for that, because I think it's very important to make this maybe more nuanced approach to the messages conveyed in these plays.
I was also really struck by this filming of the hands getting away from each other very tenderly, And I wondered if there were screens on the stage with close-ups. How is it that you see this gesture? And this gesture is extremely powerful. I don't know if this was made on purpose. It made me think of Michelangelo's fresco on the Sistine Chapel, where Adam is sort of on his own right from the start. The two hands do not touch. So it seems to me that it could be a message also to say, we are here, there is a lot of mystery, there has always been, but now it's up to us what we'll make with it, and whether we choose actually renunciation of hope and fight and resilience.
Yes.
And especially at the beginning, when the two people, the man and the woman, were presented, they were on a sort of grid. It looked like solid panels, but it could look like a matrix, the sort of very inhumane systems we're living, where we're more and more estranged from each other, even though we're supposed to be so ultra-connected. And it seems there is a whole language on precisely touching each other, care, support, and something that is precisely a posture, but not just posture, an engagement, an emotional, ethical engagement with each other, towards the environment in general, that we feel through such very tactile images.
Yes, thank you so much, Christine, and I have so many things that I would like to respond to that. But the first thing that comes to mind is this notion of care. Like at the same time as we've seen this development of climate studies, we also have care studies. And the way we care about each other, care about the climate, care about nature, care about our communities. I think there are, again, all this is interconnected with the way that things might go in one direction or another in terms of the ecological crisis and all the other crises that we are going through and that are, that converge and essentially have possibly the same roots. And so, yes, indeed, and so the fact that the stage is not entirely bare, as you noticed, it definitely looks like solar panels. With this notion of reflection, reflecting the light and also reflecting on what we do not do, and how we can maybe bring some light around. So yes, definitely, and I think that's definitely one direction I would like to go into more, this notion of care, because all these plays are about care as much as they are about, the climate. So. Yes, thank you for that.
Thank you. If I can just follow what Christine, what you said, Christine, and what you said also, Solange, is really there is this reciprocity between. The theatre informs the world. The world context informs the theatre, and the theatre informs the world context. There is again a dialogue between the two, and as you said, other issues are there, not only climate change, but care, the way, and in the performance, I would like to ask you as well, is there something that this kind of issue, or how does it impact the performance itself? You've said that in the case of lungs, there is no need of setting, there is only the theatrical space or the platform on which the characters move, even though in the images you've shown, there were things, there were tables, there was specific light, there were things on stage, and there was this, the adaptation of the camera itself. So I don't know if it was the performance which was... if it was performed indeed, or it was just a film that was made on the performance?
Sorry, yes, you're absolutely right. And sorry, because Christine, you also asked this question. Actually, what I just showed you was The footage that was made during COVID, so during the pandemic when theatres were closed, and so a lot of, maybe not a lot, but quite a few theatres decided to make productions of plays that had already been produced and to broadcast them live through through various platforms. So that people could still enjoy a theatrical experience of some sort, even though they were confined in their homes. So this is what I just showed you. So there was no audience in the theatre. It was filmed and then broadcast online. And so I suppose they chose where to place the cameras in order to provide the audience with some sort of emotional experience, even though they were not in the same room. So that might explain the choice of maybe zooming in at some specific moments, such as when the hands just go apart. So yeah, but the original production and all the other productions are of course happening in theatre with an audience there. But yes, it asked the question of the cinematic quality of this production and the way it was, the way they chose to place the cameras and all the editing maybe, because of course as you saw there were at least two cameras, each one focusing on a different character. And of course, this is a completely different experience.
Yes, yeah, it changes the perception.
It completely changes your perception and maybe even the meaning or the message that you might take out of it.
It's true, but at the same time, it imitates the way we in a theatre will look at the different characters on stage.
Yes.
We're not just focusing on only the mass, but we are trying to look at one character then another, and so it in a way mirrors the movement of our eyes.
Yes.
It was also very very interesting the way it was performed, and my question was again, when we deal with such topics, how theatrical is it? How can we really perform so many words, language, linguistic tips, and how we can express the thoughts of the characters that are our own thoughts. And I think that in fact the in between theatrical space and a form of cinematic editing fits the exercise.
It gives yet again another way to experience the play, and there's a lot of studies being conducted right now, in this post-pandemic world that we're in, about the future of theatre itself, and how we now can tend to use a lot of technology on stage and multimedia tools to provide a more immersive experience. So these are ongoing debates, and it's quite interesting to see how, on the one hand, you have this movement where playwrights are talking about climate change and also encouraging theatres, and theatres are encouraged to have a more eco-friendly, develop more eco-friendly productions. And at the same time, we have the development of high tech and all these different, very sophisticated microphones and, the binaural technology and all the big screens that are also present, more and more present on stage to provide this sort of, again, plural experience and even immersive. So there's a paradox again here, And I think it's
that's
really
what
interesting.
we discussed
Yeah.
a little in Poitiers,
Yes,
because
exactly.
we had this confrontation between
these two trends, these two completely opposite movements. And of course, I would hope that in lungs these are not real solar panels, but this gives us an idea of how we might be tempted to use technology and convince ourselves that this is going to be eco-friendly, like solar panels. Are they really? And so, and I think this contradiction, this paradox, was a very clever way. Using that was clever in terms of, setting for this play.
I have another question, but perhaps you have one, Marie.
Yeah, just for organisation-wise, we'll have to finish at 12. So we have another 10 minutes if anyone has any questions. But I just had a question, if that's okay with you, Estelle.
Okay.
It was about, it's linked to climate fiction in general, really. But it's this idea of how do you represent, and you talked about this at the beginning of your talk, this slow-moving change, so climate change in general. And you were talking about the fact that calamities are difficult to perceive on a day-to-day basis. So this is, of course, very true. And so in the example you showed, it's a play that is based in today's world, from what I've understood. Maybe it's a little bit in the future, but it's mostly about today. Yeah. And I was just wondering what the proportion of plays are that are in the future, or are they mostly in the present? And you said that, it's mostly through the mind and what people are thinking, their thoughts, basically, that we're talking about climate change. But are there instances of plays that are in the future, and how different are they to the one you showed today?
Yes, sure.
The Beautiful is...
Yeah, exactly. I was going to talk about it. So, In the Beautiful Future is coming, as well as another play called Oil by Ella Hickson. There's this confrontation or this entanglement of different timelines. And in both plays, so The Beautiful Future is coming by Flora Wilson Brown, and in Oil by Ella Hickson, one of these timelines takes place in the future. And so there is this sort of retrospective dimension that the audience is encouraged to engage in, to sort of make the connections between past, present, and future, and to see this sort of, very subtle sort of continuity, and also the resonance and the mirror or echoes between our lives in different points in history. To suggest that, there is hope since there is a future. The question being, what kind of future? But again, I'm not really able to answer your question because I still have lots of plays to read to really know how many of them indeed happen in the future. But I'm particularly interested in the way that, temporalities collide and sometimes remain not quite identifiable, like not quite determined, so that we can kind of project whatever we want and also see that maybe this is already happening or this has already happened and we don't know. And that's the thing with the theatre of uncertainty, as I call it, is that we do not really know when things are going to take place. So maybe the future is already happening, so...
Yeah.
And this is what they say, like scientists say, that things are happening a lot faster than we initially thought they would. So,
Hello. I think the microphone is not working.
Is it on?
It's on, it's recording for the...
All right.
Okay. Yes, so first of all, I would like to say thank you very, very much indeed. I found your talk inspirational, really super. Theatre has an ability to put words to emotions that we find difficult to express. So the question that I would have is, what role do you think climate theatre would have in bridging this gap between scientific fact and political action? That's the question that I would have for you.
Yep. Well, thank you very much. I'm
Yeah.
afraid I won't have enough time to
Yeah.
answer you in 5 minutes. This is such a massive question.
Yeah,
And it goes back to the question of activism and the political engagement of some playwrights. So I'm not quite sure how they do that. And I would say that each playwright has their own, perspective on that and their own, stance on what their responsibility is as playwrights. Are they writing political plays? Are they writing, plays that deal with, about care and relationships? Are they really trying to wake the audience up, or are they just providing some sort of, space to just,
Discuss.
space for discussion. So that's the question of, are these plays being judgmental? Yes, exactly. And I think that this is perhaps even more important in terms of what the theatre can do or should do, if there's such a thing, but to provide a space, but not only just a space to talk about all the possibilities, but also to really realize that this probabilistic approach to the future, whether we want it or not, does require us to maybe at some point make choices. So, and of course this is the case for the individual and for the political sphere. Governments and politicians take action and make decisions on a daily basis, and so do we, in a way. But of course the impact of their decisions and ours are not really, comparable, but still. And this is what actually I had a short video clip from Dawn King talking about her play and what she's trying to do in the trials. And she says that she is trying to, encourage us to reflect on our lives in order to make changes right now. So this is a play entirely happening in the future, but a relatively close future, like I think it's just 20 years from now, to really ask us to reflect on what we are doing, what we could be doing, what we should be doing. But, of course, on our own individual lives. So, thank you.
Shall we maybe stop there?
Yes, yeah, okay.
That's okay,
Yeah,
we're
we
going-
can, yeah, of course, because your question was quite similar to my last question, so thank you for asking this, and perhaps we'll have the possibility to talk about that after, but we have to conclude. Thank you so much again, Solange, for this very thought-provoking presentation and comments, and all the very precise answers you've given also in the discussion. So I think we can thank you again.
Thank you so much.
And we say bye-bye to our listeners online. Thank you for being there as well.
And thank you so much, Estelle.
That was very interesting.
Thank you very much,
you.
Christine. I really appreciate that. And thank you very much, Marie and James, for inviting me.
Sure. You're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you. So could you do the final? Thank you. Perfect.